you can break bones throughout the body. And the hardest bone I've found in damaging my hand is actually the cheekbone. Very difficult, but the lower jaw, you can break that very easy. So anytime I get something that's hard, feel harder in my hand, I palm it rather than hit it with a bone against bone.
Right. That makes a lot more sense. It's a lot harder to break this or hurt this than it is these 27 bones in this thing, right? Yes, Kenpo Chronicles, welcome back, party people. Okay, I'm not gonna sugarcoat this. I've got an extra special guest on deck, Grandmaster Sijo Steve Muhammad. And if you're not familiar with this great man, you soon will be. But before we jump to it, be sure you go ahead and do me that little favor. Give a little like down below, press that button. Let us know we're creating content that you're into and you want to see more of it. And if you're really feeling it, you can go down there and suggest more martial artists that you'd like to see on the channel, and even more importantly, questions that you'd like to see asked, and of course those answers that you'd like to get. As always, I'm thanking you guys for the continued support on the channel. Make sure you follow us on all of our socials so you can keep up to date on everything going on behind the scenes and what we've got coming up. You know the deal. Let's go, let's grow, you know. All right, let's do this. And here we are with nationwide tournament competitor, 10th degree black belt, one of the founders of the BKF. I'm talking the Black Karate Federation, not to mention being known for having the fastest hands in karate, a true legend in the game. Master Sijo Steve Muhammad, how are you, sir?
I'm doing wonderful, my brother. Good to see you.
It's good to see you too as well, man. I definitely know a little bit about your history. I know you were in the Marines for a while and things like that, but just for the audience so they can get a feel for you, how did you get started in the martial arts?
I actually started when I was about 13 years old. I worked at a Chinese restaurant and I saw them going through motions that I had never seen before. This was about 55, 56, something like 1950. But I had never seen it before. So I asked if I could do what they were doing, and they said yes. And I took that for 5 years, never knowing it was any type of martial science.
I see.
But when I went into the Marine Corps, I was in Okinawa, and I saw this little Okinawan guy doing martial arts for the Marine Corps. And so I went and told him, I said, man, I know something similar to that. And I demonstrated some of the movements. He said, Tai Chi. I said, oh no, that's Chinese exercise, like I really knew what.
My fighting style, Tai Chi.
So he explained it to me. But my base and foundation is when I came back to the States and I got into Kenpo. And that was, I believe, 64.
What drew you specifically to Kenpo? Didn't you get a start in Goju when you first started, or?
I did. I got that in Okinawa.
Yes, sir.
But I didn't really, because of my job and moving around and training military tactics, I was never able to really learn, not even get a good understanding of the base to Goju. But I made brown belt because I come in, I'd be there for a week or 2 weeks. They'd let me learn for 2 or 3 days and I'd go back in the field for 2 or 3 months and come back. So I never really learned basics, even though they gave me a brown belt. I didn't understand. But when I went to California, that's when I started to pick up the base, which was in Kenpo under Dan Inosanto.
So yeah, so when you trained with Dan Inosanto and then also Ed Parker, I believe, right? How long did it take for you to get your black belt with them in Kenpo?
Well, Dan Inosanto was Ed Parker's teacher for me. I made brown belt under Dan Inosanto. I left and went to Chuck Sullivan, where I made black belt. And that was about 2 or 3 years after getting my brown belt. I went to Chuck, and that's where I made black belt under Chuck Sullivan.
And so then from there, did you naturally always want to compete as well? Because I know you competed for many years, or was that just something you fell into during your training?
Oh, they didn't really have tournaments when I first started that I knew about. They didn't have them. So most of the fighting was in the school, or you could go to someone else's school and practice with them in their school. But it was usually school against school. They would just go to each school and fight with them if they wanted to fight.
from there, what did you naturally always want to teach as well? Or was that, do you think, part of like being, coming from the Marines and stuff, did you naturally have that knack to the desire to teach as well?
I didn't really know until children saw me in my backyard going through movements which they didn't understand. So they asked what it was, and I tried to explain to them, but they kept coming back and saying, hey, we'd like to try some of that stuff. So I started teaching in my backyard. And I found that I wasn't bad at teaching, so I enjoyed teaching the children in the neighborhood. So that's what I started doing.
Now, I know you've been quoted as being the fastest hands in karate, and I understand that Bruce Lee was actually the guy that quoted that.
How do you like that?
When you met Bruce at the time, were you ever able to actually spar with him or fight with him, or was it just kind of training?
Oh no, Bruce was my friend. Many people don't know, but he and I trained together, and we spoke on his language for the science of fighting, and the little bit that I spoke on the science that I had for fighting. And yes, we did move with each other. Bruce was extremely, it wasn't like he was really fast, but he had what you call uncanny timing, which made him appear to be very fast in defending himself. So we fought, not a lot I can say, because I could only go to his home when he invited me, but enough to get a good understanding that he was a very good martial artist.
I want to talk a little bit about, or have you talk a little bit about the BKF and what led you to found that organization, and how you actually went about finding students, or what you looked for in students when you first founded the BKF.
Well, it was a total of 7 of us. But in the beginning, when I first was asked about getting a school where we could have a voice in the martial arts community, it was Cliff Stewart, Ron Chappelle, and there was another guy there. I can't remember his name. He didn't become part of the BKF, but he was just there at the time. They came to my school that I was going to, which was Chuck Sullivan's school, and started talking to me about forming a unity among the blacks that they knew. At the time, I only knew one black in karate. It was me and a guy named Payne, Bob Payne, I think it was. So I had no idea there were other blacks, because we just didn't see them, and we weren't really welcome in the martial arts at that time. So when I went to Parker School, I got lucky with Danny that he allowed me to come in. But when they came to me, I only knew 2 people, and asked me about forming a federation where we would have a voice in the martial arts community. So we got other peoples like Donnie Williams, Curtis Pulliam. It's been 50-some years ago, but it was a total of 7 of us when we formed the federation.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And then is that after you formed the federation, I know your philosophy on brain sight. How did that kind of come about? And can you share a little bit about that philosophy?
But what you want is that you want the body to be able to ooze in. This is what you're doing. You want to ooze in like water, be able to change as you move in there.
I was asking people because I didn't see the way they saw looking and fighting. So I asked them one day, because I figured out that it's not the eyes that I see with, that the information that I see, it's reflected back to the brain for identification. So that's when I started calling it brain sight rather than eyesight. And I found that eyesight is slow compared to brain sight. When you see with the eye, just like you look, then all of a sudden you recognize it. But in fact, there is no delay in the 6 senses in which we have.
Yes, sir.
And when you have a delay, that delay is also transferred to your body when you see a delay of that type. But brain sight means you see something instantly with no delay, which means that you can not only block, but you can also counter movements with no delay. And as you begin to fight, you begin to realize those kind of things. That's why I call it brain sight.
I love that philosophy. And it's like when I would talk to people about you, and I still talk about a lot of the pioneers like yourself, the whole idea of, and it's very common. You'll talk to people and say, you know, like, what are you actually seeing when you're fighting? It's like you're using your brain to see, and people don't get that. So I've always loved that philosophy, because timing is really your thing, and also targeting. I noticed you're very big on targeting specific parts on the body and things to hit. And you've talked a little bit about that before. Is that still a major part of your philosophy when you're teaching now?
It does, because even though we do targeting back in the day when we were coming up and didn't have the language, we didn't quite understand. We just hit at your opponent. We never really targeted them. And then as you grow in the science of fighting, to be able to target, you must be able to see distance, angles, timing with that target. And it must be done at the same time. You cannot think of one like, oh, the distance is this, the angle is this. You cannot do it in that manner. You have to see all four at one time. And people argue with me saying, you can't do that. I said, well, maybe you can. Yeah. Because you don't understand it. But once you understand, there's no delay when you see something. When I see you, my brother, I recognize you instantly. There's no delay in me recognizing you. The same thing with a car or anything in front of you. You don't have to look at a car and say, it's red. You look at it, when you see it, it's red.
Right.
So that's where that information came from. Because when you target, you have to find the angle to be able to target that target. And when you have an angle that you targeted, then you're targeting the knuckles against the target in which you're going to attack, which means there's a great possibility, if you understand the body, that you can break bones throughout the body. And the hardest bone I've found in damaging my hand is actually the cheekbone. Very difficult, but the Lord jaw, you can break that very easy. So anytime I get something that's hard, feel harder in my hand, I palm it rather than hit it with a bone against bone.
Right. That makes a lot more sense. It's a lot harder to break this or hurt this than it is these 27 bones in this thing, right? So talk to me a little bit. I know you did some police work as well. Did you work for the sheriff's department, I believe, to help cut down on gang violence and things like that? How did that become part of your journey as well?
I worked as county police under the sheriff's department for 27 years. And we had a lot of problems with gangs. I was on the gang detail in my department. So we had a lot of problems. I worked undercover for a few years, but mainly the most enjoyable time I had was as an investigator for the department. I also did some investigation and regular patrol. And I was a training officer also for the department.
I see. And I'm sure during that time, your martial skills definitely came in handy, I'm sure, right? Just even patrolling or, like doing...
Yes. We fought almost every day. We were in a fight.
Wow.
For one reason or another. I mean, we fought a lot because we were in areas that dealt with a lot of people, and usually we were outnumbered in dealing with that.
Listen, did it go as planned?
So we had to learn to fight. So the use of the martial arts, guys call me today and tell me, man, are you still doing that crazy fighting you used to do when we were together fighting? The martial science wasn't known that well. So they've never seen anything where you can throw kicks and punches and kick them in the face or upside the head or something. They never saw that. They thought that was crazy. And usually when I'm fighting, they would actually move away from me. These guys are fighting with me. They get the heck out of the way because they were afraid that I would kick them or punch them also. So it was a time when I got a lot of experience in actual fighting, which gave me a lot of ideas as to how to come about damaging or hurting an opponent when you're fighting them. That's where that distance, angles, timing, targeting, all that came into play.
I was actually going to ask you, that's a good point. That's an interesting segue. Since you had to use so much of your skills on the street, when you did competition, did it kind of change your philosophy actually using it, you know, in real life versus competing, or was it pretty much the same to you?
No, it was different because in fighting in a tournament, even though we could hit, it was control hitting in the street. And I found that in the beginning, when I first got in the street, got out of tournaments and started fighting in the street, I actually hit, and I hit with control. I had to have a total different mindset in fighting in the street to bring that power against them. So I practiced making sure to understand this is play.
Yes,
this
sir.
is real, to make you understand.
Yes, sir. Yeah, because I would think that's a tough transition, because I think we're all so used to just fighting in the dojo or in the school. When we get out there in the real world, how do you make that transition? Is it just because the adrenaline goes, or just like you really know you got to hit? Because if you need a person to stay down, you don't have sometimes a second chance, right?
That's right. So you have to get hit in the jaw a couple of times. You figure it out.
I would imagine. That's a great point. I want to talk a little too about some of the books that you've written. I know that's a whole different thing, but you know, I admire that part of your life as well. Some of the books, the Championship Kenpo and God Side of Kenpo. What was that experience like? Is it, you know, I know that's completely different discipline when you sit down to actually write. Is it actually harder than training, like writing about, you know, the arts and stuff?
It's a lot harder because I find it with me, I have to get someone to help me. And Bishop William or Donnie William was the one that helped me with it, because I would give it, write down something and hand it to him a week or two later. And then the next week I'd hand him something on the same thing, but it'd be different than what I gave him the first time. So I didn't know, because my mind kept growing, and I kept everything that would grow in my mind, I'd put it in the book where it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be something else. So I had a hard time doing that with him until he taught me a little bit about, you know, once you write it, you can write other things, but leave it that way, you know, and we'll come up with an answer as to how to use it.
Yeah, no,
but I enjoyed that.
I didn't want to forget to. I know we spoke a little bit about the BKF earlier, but people, you know, it's like kind of the reputation is world renowned. So back then, when you first started the organization, did you find it hard when you would, you know, like bring your guys out to do actual fighting and tournaments and stuff like that? Was it like being like some of the only Black people that were doing martial science, as you say, at that point? Was it tougher in competitions because you maybe saw there was favoritism with judges or things like that, or?
Oh yeah, we did. Didn't really want to. We didn't know. We thought that they would accept us when we came to a tournament, but they saw a group of Blacks, and when the first tournament we went there in great numbers. It was over 100 and some of us that went there the first time. That includes the parents, the siblings and relatives and whoever wanted. Everybody wanted to go to see us fight. So we were there in great numbers. And when we got there, they called the police on us, you know. So
wow.
We had to deal with it. Yes, they called the police and said there were a group of Blacks that were coming in and they were going to, you know, disturb the tournament. But we didn't know they had been called on us. So I belonged to Ed Parker's organization, and I asked someone to send someone out to talk so he could speak for me because he knew me. And his wife came out, and she came out and she looked around. She said, "What's the problem?" She didn't see me standing there. She just saw all the Black students. And she said, "What's the problem?" And the guy said, the police officer that came said, "They want to come in for the tournament. Are they allowed to come in?" And she said, "Well, why not? Who are they with?" And she looked over and she saw me. She said, "Oh, Steve, are they with you?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." That's how we got into our first tournament, because they weren't going to let us in. Wow. Because they thought that we were going to start a... Wow. So we're very happy about forming the Black Karate Federation. And that was another thing, too. When we said, "What's the name of your organization?" Black Karate Federation. They didn't like that. They wanted to change it to something else. So when we were up there fighting this, we would like to invite into our organization of IKKA, the Black Panther Karate Federation.
Okay.
And we looked around looking for the Black Panther Karate Federation. We didn't know it was us.
Oh, okay, got you.
We were looking around, and all of a sudden they said, and the leader of the Black Panther Karate Federation is Steve Muhammad.
You're like, that's news to me, huh?
I ran up there to grab that microphone. I said, I have nothing against the Black Panthers, but that is not the name of our organization. I said, the Black Panthers do good work in our community, so we know them and we love them. I let them know that right away, that, we had no problem with that, but that's not our organization's name. So we finally got it straight.
Okay. No, and I'm glad you did. The BKF, like I said, it's like world renowned in the history with you guys. I want to talk a little bit too about, your stint in acting. Everybody world famously knows you. You had a little stint in Enter the Dragon and things like that. How did that kind of come about? You were there with Jim Kelly and everything?
How it actually came about was Warner Brothers contacted me about a month before the movie Enter the Dragon, and asked me if I wanted to consider being in that movie. And so I told them yes. So they kept in contact with me until the night that we were getting ready to film. And the night that we were getting ready to film, that's when Jim Kelly came up. He was in Screen Actors Guild. I was not in Screen Actors Guild. So they told me that I wouldn't be able to get the part that Jim came to get.
I see.
And they tried to get him and his advisor to film the part that they were going to film that night, film it the next night. But Jim and his advisor didn't want to do that. So they had to give him the part if they wanted to get that film shot that night. I was going to shoot it, but the next day they were going to take me and have me to join the Screen Actors Guild so I could do that part for them. But I was unable to do it. So Jim was able to do it at that time. But they had to put me in because they used an actual school. That was my school at that time. That wasn't just a...
yeah, was that your school? I was going to ask if that was your school.
That is right. That was my school.
Awesome.
Everything that they done that night, that part, was done around the school.
Yes, sir. And did you do any other movie roles after that, or?
I also did something in Karate Kid.
Yeah, I read that. So what did you you had a small part in there as well?
It was about me being a referee within Karate Kid, where I refereed some of the matches that were there.
Okay. Okay.
All the parts that I've had in doing movies, they were very small parts.
Yes, sir.
But I enjoyed it.
And also, I know you did some bodyguard work for Wesley Snipes, right? How did that come about?
I worked for Wesley for 10 years. I would say he is one of the greatest persons and martial artists that I've ever met. He is really a good, beautiful brother, and I love that brother. There's nothing. He took care of me and my family 100% when I was with him, brother. He sat me down one day and he said, Steve, what will you do and what won't you do in involving me? He told me a whole lot of stuff that he wanted me to do. And my answer to that was no.
Right.
So he said, Steve, being that I've already hired you, what will you do for me?
Right.
I said, I will protect you with my life. He said, brother, that's enough. And that's how I got hired, working with him. But he knew about my martial arts because he was a martial artist and a very good one.
So was it just that you guys were out together somewhere and he kind of picked you out and specifically asked you to bodyguard for him, or?
He knew me. He knew about me. He had never met me, but knew about me. And he saw me walking we were doing something for Minister Farrakhan. I was on security for Minister Farrakhan. He saw me. He said, "Who's that brother right there?"
Yes,
he
sir.
said, "That's Steve Sanders." You know, he said, "Steve Sanders, that's not the karate guy, is it?" And they told him, "Yes, that's the karate guy." So he asked them if they would bring me over to speak with him. But before that, he asked about who I was because I was outside dealing with some brothers from the gang, it was actually a clip set. And he and I began to get into a debate where he was starting to get out of hand. So I said, "How about you and I go over by the cars over here and you and I talk so that we can talk any way we want and we won't get anybody else that may have a bad temper or something that will start a fight among us." And like a suburb where we went in between these two cars and he had the window down and the windows were dark. So we didn't see anybody in the car when we came up. So we're just talking. So he said, the guy, when he got around there with me, he said, "Oh, first of all," he says, I don't want to be fighting the Muslims, brother, because I don't want them, to be coming at me for any reason." He said, "We're not going to fight, are we?" I said, "No, sir. When I said we're coming to talk, we're coming to talk." So he said, "Yes, we got an understanding." And Wesley was hearing me talk to them. That's why he said, "Who was that guy?"
I see.
And then that's when we found out it was actually somebody he knew. That's when he said, "Give me your number and I'll get in touch with you in about a month." I didn't really know who Wesley was then. So I said, "Yeah," he said, "I might want you to work for me." I said, "Okay," And about a month later, a lady called from his office and she didn't introduce herself. She just said, "Mr. Steve," she said, "are you ready to go to Florida?" I said, "Who is this?" And then she said, "Oh, I'm sorry." She said, "I thought you knew who it was." And she told me, "I'm representing Wesley Snipes and he wants you to work for him." And when she told me the money I could make, I said, "Oh, yes, ma'am."
We happy?
Yeah, we happy.
Yes, sir.
I am ready to work for him. That's how I started to work for him. I went out to Florida and we became friends. I stayed with him for 10 years.
I know you still train, and if people wanted to train with you, is there a website to go to, or how is it best to find you and they were interested in training with you?
Well, you can have them. I'll give you a number: 404-787-2868.
What do you look for now in students? I mean, do you still have a strong student base, or do you do one-on-one training, or?
I have classes at my home and I also have them on Zoom. So there isn't any specific thing. They come to me and they explain to me why they want to learn the martial arts and what reason they have. That reason is the reason that I would want to teach them, because there are some that you really don't want to teach.
Yes,
and there are many that you do because of how they've been dealt with and what they're going through. So I choose them on that.
Well, thank you so much, sir, for taking the time. Sijo Master Steve Muhammad, I really appreciate it.
Oh, yes, sir. I thank you, my brother, for honoring me to be able to speak with you and be on your show.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure.
This is Sijo Steve Muhammad, and I thank you very, very much for watching Kung Fu Chronicles.